In 334 BC, Alexander, ruler of Macedonia, embarked on an extraordinary military campaign against the dominant Persian Empire. Despite his youth of just 20 years, his exceptional leadership skills and bravery led him to triumph in numerous battles. Over the span of a decade, Alexander pushed the boundaries of the known world and established one of the most expansive empires in history. His impact on history was immense, with few individuals having wielded such influence. Ancient Greece, starting from approximately 500 BC, witnessed remarkable advancements in various fields such as art, philosophy, and warfare. Athens and Sparta emerged as the two principal city-states, with Athens flourishing as a hub of democracy, art, and philosophy, and Sparta renowned for its military prowess. The year 480 BC saw Athens and Sparta joining forces against the Persian invasion. At Thermopylae, a small Greek contingent led by 300 Spartans held off the vast Persian army for 3 days before succumbing. Despite this setback, the Greek navy secured a crucial victory at the Battle of Salamis, although the Persians razed the sacred temples of the Athenian Acropolis. The following year, the Greeks achieved a decisive land victory at Plataea, halting the Persian advance. The subsequent half-century marked the golden age of classical Greece, but internal conflicts between Athens and Sparta eventually erupted into prolonged warfare, weakening the Greek states. Macedonia, traditionally viewed as a backward region, transformed under King Philip II, who introduced military reforms including the sarissa, a formidable 18-foot pike. In 338 BC, Philip's forces decisively defeated Thebes and Athens at the Battle of Chaeronea, solidifying Macedonian dominance. Philip's assassination in 336 BC thrust Alexander, his 20-year-old son, onto the throne. Tutored by Aristotle and seasoned in military campaigns, Alexander inherited his father's ambition to conquer Persia. Before embarking on this grand endeavor, Alexander had to consolidate his rule as king. At his residence, potential rivals were eliminated, and rebellions in Illyria, Thessaly, and central Greece were swiftly crushed. The city of Thebes was singled out for harsh treatment, facing complete destruction and its populace being sold into slavery. In the spring of 334 BC, Alexander commenced his campaign against the Persian Empire, crossing the Hellespont into Asia Minor, marking the beginning of an extraordinary military endeavor. Alexander's army comprised approximately 40,000 soldiers from various regions of Greece. Commanded by the seasoned Macedonian general Parmenion, the infantry consisted of 9,000 Macedonian phalangites equipped with the formidable 18-foot sarissa. These highly trained soldiers formed a formidable phalanx, presenting an impregnable wall of spear tips, but were vulnerable to flanking attacks. The elite Hydaspes, led by Parmenion's son Nicanor, safeguarded the phalanx's flanks. Supporting the Macedonians were 7,000 Greek allies and 5,000 mercenaries armed as hoplites, wielding 8-foot spears and large round shields. Although not as effective as the Macedonian phalangites, they were well-armored and skilled in combat. The Agrianes, elite skirmishers from southern Bulgaria, served as the army's shock troops, while skirmishers from Thrace and Illyria utilized javelins, slings, and bows. The backbone of Alexander's cavalry was the companion cavalry, consisting of 1,800 elite horsemen armed with spears and swords, led by Philotas, another of Parmenion's sons. Alexander personally led the royal squadron of cavalry. Additionally, there were 1,800 Thessalian cavalry under Callas, 600 cavalry from other Greek regions under Arrhigeus, and 900 mounted scouts from Thrace and Paonia. In the Persian Empire, under the rule of satraps, internal deliberations were held among officials from threatened provinces in Asia Minor. Despite the advice of Memnon of Rhodes, urging a scorched earth strategy to counter Alexander's advance, the satraps opted to confront him at the Granicus River. The Persian army, positioned behind the river, consisted of approximately 10,000 cavalry from various regions of the empire supported by infantry reserves, including Greek mercenaries. Alexander, determined to engage before the Persians could retreat, quickly led his troops to the river's edge, despite being slightly outnumbered. Ignoring counsel to wait until dawn, he ordered an immediate assault, initiating a fierce battle as his forces crossed the river under a barrage of projectiles from the Persian line. In the midst of the chaos, Alexander personally led his troops, engaging the Persian cavalry in a desperate struggle. The Macedonians fought fiercely to drive the Persians away from the riverbank, while the Persians were equally determined to prevent their crossing and push them back into the river. Alexander's aggressive assaults may have seemed reckless, but he was actually buying time for the remainder of his army to cross the river, including the formidable Macedonian phalanx. In the midst of the chaos, Alexander found himself fighting for his life. Facing two Persian nobles, Rohisachis and Smithridates, Alexander was struck on the head by Rohisachis, but his helmet absorbed much of the blow, allowing Alexander to retaliate and defeat him. Smithridates then attempted to attack Alexander from behind, only to be intercepted and disarmed by Black Clitus, son of Dropidas. With the Greek army successfully crossing the river, the Persian cavalry faced the daunting prospect of confronting the Macedonian phalanx. However, most of them turned and fled upon witnessing the speed and ferocity of Alexander's attack. Despite pleas for mercy, Alexander, driven by a fierce determination, ordered the massacre of the Greek mercenaries who had aligned with the Persians. Alexander emerged victorious, gaining control over Asia Minor, but the Persian Empire remained a formidable adversary. Darius III, the King of Kings, now posed the next major challenge for Alexander. As Alexander approached Sardis, the capital of the Persian province of Lydia, its commander surrendered without resistance, enabling Alexander to advance further into Persian territory. However, before pressing forward, Alexander recognized the need to neutralize Persian naval power, which could threaten his lines of communication. Instead of engaging the Persians at sea, Alexander opted to attack the Greek coastal cities of Miletus and Halicarnassus. Despite their determined resistance, both cities fell by winter. In the following spring of 333 BC, Alexander continued his campaign into Lycia and Phrygia. At Gordium, he encountered the legendary Gordian knot, which he famously severed with his sword. Meanwhile, Memnon of Rhodes, a skilled Greek general serving the Persians, led a naval offensive in the Aegean, capturing Chios and Lesbos before his untimely death. 18 months since crossing the Hellespont, Alexander's army was poised to advance into Syria when the main Persian army, led by Darius III, appeared, seeking to trap and annihilate Alexander's forces. Darius, outnumbering Alexander almost 2-1, positioned his army strategically on a narrow coastal plain near Issus, forcing Alexander to confront him in battle. Despite the overwhelming odds, Alexander charged forward, leading his troops into a fierce struggle. While his right wing achieved initial success, the Macedonian phalanx in the center faced difficulties due to disorderly formation and fierce resistance from Darius's Greek mercenaries. Sensing the danger, Alexander regrouped and led a decisive assault, routing the enemy forces. As the battle turned in favor of the Macedonians, Darius fled the battlefield, leaving his army in disarray. Parmenion and his troops on the left wing fought valiantly against the Persian cavalry, preventing them from breaking through and enveloping Alexander's army. The Battle of Issus ended in a resounding victory for Alexander, securing his dominance over the western territories of the Persian Empire. At the mouth of the Nile, he founded a new city, Alexandria, then traveled to the desert oracle of Siwa, where, according to some accounts, the priests welcomed him as son of Amun, king of the gods. Alexander returned east to Tyre, where in 331 BC he received news of trouble back home. Despite his great victories over the Persians, many Greeks regarded Alexander as a tyrant. King Agis of Sparta, with Persian support, now launched a revolt against Macedonia. Antipater, Alexander's commander in Greece, was already dealing with rebellion in Thrace, but he quickly marched south and met Agis in battle near the city of Megalopolis. Even the legendary Spartans were now no match for Macedonian military power. The Spartan army was crushed. King Agis himself was among the fallen. With his base in Greece secure once more, Alexander advanced towards the Persian heartlands, seeking a final showdown with Darius. He received a letter from the Persian king, offering him a fortune in gold, his daughter in marriage, and half his empire in exchange for peace. But Alexander's stunning victories, all the oracles and acclamations, had now convinced him that his destiny was to rule the world. He rejected the Persian king's offer. He didn't want half the empire. He was coming to take it all. In 334 BC, Alexander, the 21-year-old ruler of the small Greek kingdom of Macedonia, led an invasion of the vast Persian Empire. It seemed impossible odds, but thanks to Greek military dominance and Alexander's fearless leadership, he won two great battles against the Persians at the river Granicus and at Issus. Having subdued Persian lands west of the Euphrates River, he now headed east into the empire's heartlands, seeking a final showdown with the Persian king Darius III. Receiving news that a great Persian army led by Darius had assembled at Gaugamela, near modern Mosul in Iraq, he made straight for it. This was Darius's last chance to stop Alexander, and Alexander's chance to smash Persian power once and for all. Darius had chosen to fight on open ground, where his advantage in numbers would be more telling. His soldiers had also worked hard to clear and flatten the terrain to make it suitable for Persian war chariots. By modern estimates, the Persian army was between 50 and 80,000 strong and made up of contingents from across the empire. Infantry from Syria and Babylonia, cavalry from Armenia, India, and Central Asia, up to 200 scythed chariots, even a handful of war elephants. Alexander's army was smaller and may have been outnumbered by as much as 2 to 1. He deployed his units in their usual formation on the left flank, Thracian and Thessalian cavalry, commanded by Parmenion. In the center, the Macedonian veterans of the phalanx, each armed with their 18-foot sarissa pike. On the right flank, Alexander with his elite cavalry, the companions, and his best infantry, the Hydaspes. These were the units with which Alexander planned to launch his main attack. Greek hoplites formed a second line and supported both wings, which were angled back to guard against encirclement by the Persians. The battle began when Alexander led his wing out to the right, a move that took the Persians by surprise. Could Alexander really be trying to encircle their huge army? The Persians mirrored his movement, taking troops away from their center to outflank Alexander and prevent him leaving the area they'd cleared for the Persian chariots. But Alexander's unusual maneuver was a trap to entice the Persians to weaken their center. When he saw that it had worked, he ordered his Greek cavalry to charge. To keep the Persians fixed in position, a giant cavalry battle developed on the right wing. Darius, meanwhile, judging this to be the decisive moment, unleashed his chariots. But expert Agriana's javelin throwers took out horses and crews, while the Greek infantry opened lanes, allowing the chariots to pass harmlessly through. Now Alexander led his companion cavalry and parts of the Macedonian phalanx in a headlong charge straight at the weakened Persian center, fighting his way towards Darius himself. The sudden ferocity of Alexander's assault threw the Persians into panic. The center of the army broke and ran, King Darius himself leading the rout. But Alexander's left wing was in serious trouble. Parmenion, facing a huge onslaught by Persian cavalry, was virtually surrounded. Indian and Scythian horsemen had even ridden through a gap in the Greek line. But rather than wheeling and attacking the Greeks from behind, they carried straight on to loot their camps and sent a desperate appeal to Alexander for help. The king abandoned his pursuit of Darius, regrouped, and charged the Persian right wing. It was the hardest and bloodiest fighting of the battle, claiming the lives of 60 of Alexander's companions. Finally, as news of Darius's flight spread across the battlefield, the last Persian horseman turned and fled. The Battle of Gaugamela was a stunning and complete victory for Alexander. According to ancient sources, he lost just a few hundred men, while the Persians lost thousands. Alexander had routed Darius's great army, and now the road to Babylon, the empire's main capital, lay open. The Macedonian king entered the great city in triumph, recognized by Persian officials as its new rightful ruler. So too at the city of Susa, where Alexander ceremonially took his seat upon the royal throne of Persia. In the Zagros Mountains, at a pass known as the Persian Gates, a courageous Persian force held up Alexander's army for a month. The Greeks eventually found a mountain path that bypassed their position, allowing them to encircle and wipe out the defenders. In early 330 BC, Alexander reached Persepolis, the empire's ceremonial capital. Alexander wanted to appear as a liberator to the Persians, as a legitimate successor to King Darius. But now he ordered Persepolis to be pillaged and burnt, retribution for the Persian invasion of Greece and the burning of Athens' sacred temples. In 480 BC, Alexander headed north into Media, where Darius had taken refuge in the royal city of Ecbatana. Alexander was determined to capture Darius, but the fugitive king fled east in the hope of raising a new army in the provinces of Parthia, Bactria, and Sogdia. It was not to be. As Alexander closed in, the Persian king was murdered by one of his own governors, Bessus, who then proclaimed himself the empire's new ruler. Alexander gave orders for Darius to be buried in the royal tombs of Persepolis alongside his ancestors. Then he paused to organize his vast new empire. Alexander appointed viceroys to rule the provinces on his behalf, keeping several Persians who had sworn loyalty in their posts. Then he resumed his march east. His goal was to find and kill the usurper Bessus, subjugate the empire's eastern provinces, and reach the far edge of the world. In 330 BC, Alexander continued his march east with the goal of finding and killing Bessus, a Persian usurper claiming to be the rightful king, and subjugating the empire's eastern provinces. Alexander headed first for Arya, today part of Afghanistan, where the Persian governor Satybarzanes had launched a revolt. After initially pretending to submit to Alexander, the rebellion was crushed, and Satybarzanes was killed in single combat by a Greek cavalry officer. Nearby, Alexander founded the city of Alexandria, Ariana, modern Herat, one of around a dozen cities that Alexander would eventually found, almost all bearing his name. Alexander marched on to Frada. The Macedonian court had a long tradition of plots and assassination. 6 years before, Alexander's own father, King Philip, had been murdered by his bodyguard. He was now informed that Philotas, commander of his companion cavalry, had uncovered a plot to assassinate Alexander, but kept it secret. Philotas and his father, Parmenion, were among the most respected of Alexander's commanders and had played crucial roles in all his great victories. But when Philotas confessed under torture, Alexander had him executed, then sent assassins back to Ecbatana, where Parmenion was governor, to kill him before he even heard of his son's death and had a chance to turn against Alexander. In 329, Alexander resumed his pursuit of Bessus. En route, he founded the city of Alexandria, Arachosia, modern Kandahar, in southern Afghanistan. As he reached Kunduz, Bessus was betrayed by his own men and handed over in chains. Alexander sent him back to Persia for execution. As a kingslayer, Alexander pushed on into modern Tajikistan, where the Sogdians rose up against him. He had to fight off attacks by local tribes and take several towns. By assault on the banks of the Jaxartes River, he founded the city of Alexandria, Escate, meaning Alexandria the furthest, because he had at last reached the limit of the Persian Empire. This frontier was frequently raided by nomads known to the Greeks as Scythians. Alexander lured them into a decisive battle near the Jaxartes. The result was a crushing victory for the Macedonian king that put an end to the raids. If you enjoyed this video about one of the greatest generals in history, don't forget to subscribe. And additionally, if you want to support the channel and explore various topics related to the past and the unknown, feel free to do so.